So on this worksheet at the top, we got to label our applications and menu bar. So in Photoshop, it is this top bar right here. So file, edit, image, layer, type, select, filter, 3D, view, plugin, window, help. That is going to be your applications and menu bar. So with your pencil or pen at that top, I'm just going to have you put a letter A to indicate that's where that belongs. The second one is your options bar. That is directly underneath your applications and menu bar. So on the left-hand side, you should have, these are called your tools. This is your toolbox or your tools panel. When I click on one of these, notice how my options bar changes. So when I have my brush tool selected, it gives me brush options. When I have my gradient tool selected, it gives me options that deal with the gradient. When I have my shape tool selected, so see how those options change. So that's going to be labeled letter B directly underneath the applications and menu bar. Like I just said, this panel on the left-hand side are your tools. Okay, so that's going to be labeled letter C. And underneath some of your tools, there are hidden tools. So you'll notice that there's like a little piece of paper that has the edge folded up. If you right click on those, you're going to notice that there's hidden tools underneath some of these. Actually, I think most of them have hidden tools. So these are going to do things that are similar to the tool that is on top, but maybe a little bit more specific thing. And we will get into that. So just know that there are tools hidden underneath some of these main tools. Okay, then we're going to go on to the right-hand side, and yours might look a little bit different than mine. It looks like some of you have, which is fine, the Learn Photoshop opened. I must have X'd out of that at some point in time, but that gives you some little videos and stuff to watch to kind of learn some things. But I got rid of mine a while ago. I don't know how to get it back. I'm sure somewhere up here. But we've got our colors panel that is labeled letter D. Okay, and then underneath that, we've got our adjustments panels. Right now, it should be defaulted to properties. But if you notice to the right of the word properties is adjustments. So this is an area where I work with a lot when I deal with photos. So if I want to adjust the brightness contrast, the color balance, black and white, apply a photo filter, these adjustments work really well for photography. They do add an adjustment layer on top of your photograph. Okay, and then at the bottom here is your layers panel. So that's going to be, so we've got E for the adjustments and then F for the layers panel. Once we get some more layers going on, you're going to notice that there's going to be a lot of stuff in this lower right-hand corner. You can click the eyeball to hide or show layers. You can click the lock to lock or unlock a layer. Lots more to come with the layers. So that's the front side of the worksheet. If you flip it over to the back, we're going to go over specifically what these tools can do for you. So at the top, it says using your own words, describe to the right of each tool what they are used for. You may use the tools panel packet as a reference or hover over each tool to display a short explanation and demonstration. So if you hover over these tools, it gives you a short demonstration. And if you click on the Learn More, it should bring up some information to help you with that. So even though you have that at your fingertips, just reading over what a tool does doesn't really sink it into your brain. And there's so many tools, you don't even know like what you're getting yourself into. This is amazing stuff. So the first tool, if you want to label that the move tool, you can, and it moves a selection or layer. Just really quickly, you guys have binders at the end of your table. So these binders on the inside of them, after our syllabus, they have a tools panel overview. So it tells you exactly what all those tools are and what's hidden underneath there. The second and third, fourth page in the binder give you a little rundown of those tools. So if you're somebody who, wants to work with the binder, those are all available for you. You can grab those at the end of the table. And then this sheet here, I really love because it is a list of the shortcuts. So to get to the move tool, and the shortcuts usually are written next to the tool, so in parentheses. So the letter V will get you the move tool. Okay, the letter M will get you the marquee tool. L will get you the lasso. So you'll notice that there's lots of shortcuts available in Photoshop. If this is a career path you are interested in, you're going to want to learn the shortcuts sooner than later because they're going to save you a ton of time in the long run. Okay, so the move tool moves things. I'm just going to really quickly draw something, and I'm going to click on my move tool. Actually, if I click the letter M, it gives me, or I'm sorry, if I click on the letter V, it gives me my move tool, and I can move things around. Okay, so if you need to move anything in Photoshop, you use the move tool. When you use the move tool, it moves things 5 pixels at a time. So if you want to nudge something, go down to your arrows and you can move things, nudge it to the right by clicking the right arrow, up by clicking the up arrow, obviously, left or down. So we'll talk more about that when you need to nudge something right into the correct place. You can also use the arrow tools. Okay, so that's the move tool, pretty basic. Underneath the move tool are your marquee tools. So if you right click on there, you'll notice you have a rectangular, elliptical, single row, and a single column marquee tool. And if I hover, it tells you that the marquee tool makes a selection in the shape of a rectangle. So that's what the rectangular marquee tool does. If you have the elliptical marquee tool, it will make an oval or a circular selection. And you can see that's what they're doing there. They're selecting the moon in this image. They're called marching ants, that selection that goes around something. So you'll see that it's like black and white kind of blinking. Those are called the marching ants. That indicates that you have a selection. So if I click and I draw, you can see that there is a circle inside of my rectangle that is selected. So right now, that circle is my selection. And if I hit, let me change this to rasterize it. If I hit delete, I can get rid of that middle part of that shape there. Okay. And then to get rid of my marching ants, a shortcut is Control D to deselect it. I can go back to my move tool and I can move this shape around. Okay. So that's what the marquee tool does. That's the elliptical marquee tool. The rectangular marquee tool, I could like cut this part of the image off if I want. Hit delete. Maybe I want to trim the top. Hit delete. Maybe I want to trim the left side. Okay, so I can really use this marquee tool to kind of edit things a little bit, and Control D to deselect. You're going to use the marquee tool quite a bit. It's a really great tool to kind of like help with editing things. Then we move underneath to the lasso tool. We have lots of lasso options, which are really, really cool, and they do totally different things. So the regular lasso tool, it makes a freehand selection. So notice how this artist is able to just go around this flower and select. It's kind of like an oval shape. It's not quite a circle, but they can customize it. If I go to my polygonal lasso tool, it makes selections by connecting straight lines. So notice this geometric building. You can select that with the polygonal lasso. And then the third one is the magnetic lasso. You can select edges that snaps onto the picture. I'll finish this screencastify and I'll put it in Google Classroom for you and Caroline. See ya. So this shape is not geometric. It's kind of organic. It's kind of in between. So you can, if you've got something that's like high contrast, so the statue here is very different colored from the background, you can use that magnetic lasso to select it because the colored pixels are so different. Okay, that one's a really cool tool to use. To end the lasso, a lot of times people have problems with the lasso because they'll be using it and it'll like go crazy and they're like, oh my gosh, like how do I end this? If you just double click, it'll end it. And this is a crazy selection, so I can hit Control D to deselect it. Another way to end a selection is by hovering over the starting point. It gives you a little circle underneath the lasso, and that's when you know you're back to the start and you can click on it. Some little tips. You will get into trouble with the lasso, but it's okay. The next tool is the object selection tool. It automatically finds an object inside a defined region. So like this grapefruit here, when they draw a box around it, it'll snap onto the shape. I don't think that is in, no, this is like an outdated tool panel, so that one's not on there. You don't have to write about that one. Then we've got our crop tool. To be honest, we don't use it very often in Photoshop. I do use the crop tool a lot in photography. If I want to crop something in Photoshop for our class, I will usually use the marquee tool and it will draw around the areas when I want to cut it. Because the crop tool will change the size of your document, which a lot of times we don't really necessarily want to do. Okay, we want to keep it like 8.5 by 11, or we want to keep it 11 by 8.5. So I don't really want you cropping things down necessarily. We don't use the frame tool, so we can skip over that. I do this a little bit of a different way. The eyedropper tool, this is an awesome tool. Let me get a different colored shape going on here so you can really see what that eyedropper tool does. Let me get another one. Oh, it already rasterized it. Let me use where is my paint bucket? Okay, so, oh, those aren't really that different. Let me try to make this even more different. There we go, that's better. Okay, so the eyedropper tool, it will sample a color and it'll bring it up right in here in your color or your swatches. So let's pretend that I wanted these two rectangles, these blue rectangles, to be the same color. If I take my eyedropper and I click on the first rectangle, it gives me that exact color right here. So if I double click on this, I can see that it is 14AC8. That's the code for this exact color. Okay, so if I want this one to be that exact color, I've got it right here. So then I can click on, I can use my paint bucket and I can fill it so that those are the same colors. Believe it or not, you're gonna wanna use your eyedropper quite a bit. It's just a really great tool that saves a lot of time and energy. So samples a color from an image. So this bird here, wherever you click on it with the eyedropper, it gives you that exact color. This tool we're gonna use a lot for the kaleidoscope. The spot healing brush, kind of more something we don't really use a lot of, but I guess you kind of could. It is supposed to remove marks and blemishes. So if you're trying to, make faces look a little bit cleaner, you can use that. That example is it doesn't always work exactly that way, just an FYI. The brush tool, this is an awesome tool and there's so many really cool features with it. First of all, when you click on your brush tool, in your options panel, you've got all these different settings, okay? Another thing to get to your brushes is if you go to Window and Brushes, it'll bring this up on the side here and it'll give you your brushes and your brush settings. So there's so many different things you can do with your brushes. And there are tons and tons of brushes in Photoshop. So if you just take one of them, you can see what that brush looks like down here. You can change the size of the brush, the spacing. You can change the angle of it. And these are all things that you will be able to change too when I hand out the styluses with the pressure sensitivity on the drawing tablets. So you'll be able to use your brushes and you can make them see-through. You can change the opacity of them, all kinds of really cool things. So that's the brush tool. Underneath the brush tool is the clone stamp. So I like to use the example with grass, but here you can see they are adding more cherries into the picture by selecting an area and then drawing with it. And it just takes whatever's in that cursor and it kind of like duplicates it. So if I go to So if I take a picture of grass, let's say, and I copy it and I paste it in here, and let's say I want to get rid of this watermark. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it better because it's the Pixar's watermark on the side here. I can use my clone stamp tool and I can make, so right now my clone stamp is pretty small. You can see it's that little circle. If I use my brackets, I can make my clone stamp bigger or smaller by using my left or my right bracket. And if I hold Alt, it brings me this little bullseye. So I can click this blade of grass and notice how it takes that area and I can redraw with it. So I can slowly start getting rid of this watermark. Sometimes it takes a little bit to, I'm going to have to like change that duplication there and kind of clean it up a little bit, but you get the idea. It's a way to kind of clean things up, kind of make them your own. So that is the clone stamps. You can do some really crazy things with the clone stamp. We don't really use the history brush tool. The eraser tool, what do you think the eraser tool does? Oh, it erases, so I can erase. I want to make my eraser bigger. Again, I'm using my bracket. So I can erase this whole grass layer if I want. Okay, it only erased the grass layer because notice in my layers panel, my layer 1 was my grass. If I Control Z, you can see that. Okay, if I want to erase my brushes, I have to make sure I'm on that brush layer. So it's rectangle 3 layer, then I can erase my brushes, but it won't erase anything on the other 2 layers. So it'll erase my brush and it'll erase this rectangle. If I want to erase my black and white rectangle, I've got to be on that layer to erase it. So that's really where those layers come in handy. The paint bucket. The paint bucket is where you can fill areas of color. So we've got 2 little colors right here. We've got the foreground and the background color. You can use this toggle arrow to switch between the 2. So if I want to change this from white to, let's say, red, I can do that. If I want blue on top, red on top. So right now my red is active. So if I click on my layer 2 and I rasterize it, I can fill this with my red color. If I want to fill it with blue, I can toggle that so the blue's on top and I can make it blue. Okay, so that's how you can use your paint bucket. The blur tool, everybody thinks like the blur tool is awesome, but it's very, very faint blurring. So if I want to blur this rectangle, up here I've got my strength at 50. If I make that strength higher, I should be able to start blurring, but it takes a while. So I'm clicking and I'm drawing and I'm blurring the top of this rectangle. Notice how, whoops, I'm on the wrong tool. Notice how it takes a while to actually get it to blur. So the more I click and the more I drag, the blurrier it gets, but it's pretty faint. If I zoom in, you can see how blurry this is as opposed to the bottom. Bottom, no blur. Top, blur. Okay, so that's the blur tool. That kind of makes sense, right? Blur tool. Then we've got the dodge tool. Underneath the dodge tool, you've got the burn and the sponge tool. So we'll start with the dodge tool. The dodge tool lightens an area. Notice how as they scroll over that dog, it gets a lot lighter, like its face lightens up and it gets brighter. The burn tool is the opposite. The burn tool is going to darken. See how they can darken that little stone? And then the sponge tool saturates. So if you want to add color, oh, do they not have a little graphic for the, oh, they don't really have a, that's kind of sad. Let's find a picture that is kind of more dull and then we can brighten it. We'll do this luscious green grass lawn. Copy it, paste it. And if I use my sponge tool, and right now I can desaturate and I can saturate. So if I wanted to make this like black and white, I don't know why I would want to make the grass black and white. I can. If I change this setting to saturate, it is going to make that grass a brighter color. Okay, so you can saturate or desaturate using the sponge tool. We don't use the pen tool. We can skip that one. The next one is the type tool. So you can type vertically, horizontally, or you can type with a mask. So generally speaking, we type left to right horizontally. I'm going to make my text bigger so you can see it. A lot of people are used to making a text box, but you can just click and it's going to give you some Latin here. This always pops up when you are working with text in Photoshop. You can highlight it and you can type whatever you want there. I can use my move tool to move this around. I can rotate it. I can make it bigger, smaller, taller, wider, all kinds of things. If I want to make it taller, if I hold Shift, it will let me change it. Normally, it doesn't let you do that because it doesn't want you to skew things. But if you hold Shift, you can make any adjustments that you want. If I want to change the color of this, I can highlight it. And up here, I can change it to a different color if I want. Okay, so that's text, pretty self-explanatory there. We can skip over the path selection tool, the rectangle tool. These are all of your shapes here. So you have rectangles, circles, triangles, polygons, line tool, and the custom shape tool. When I click on these, notice the changes in my options panel. So up here, I've got all of these different types of shapes. So I've got leaf trees. I've got wild. Oh my gosh, they must have just added these. These are new, you guys. I've never seen some of these before. The wild animals, this is new. I've never had this. Oh my gosh. And these trees too. We've never had, these trees are brand new. I'm so excited. Look at, we've got an ostrich. We've got a bristle tree. I haven't used Photoshop, to be honest, since last school year. So like end of May. So those are, where are all my old shapes though? Large list. I'll have to kind of work with that. We'll have to figure that out. I'm not sure where all my other append default. I'm going to click that and see what happens. Did they change? I'm going to have to look into this. These custom shapes are different than what I'm used to. So I'll have to look at that before we actually start the shapes assignment because I clearly don't know what I'm doing anymore. They've changed it on me. We used to never have a triangle tool either. We had to do it in the polygon and we had to do our number of sides be 3. You guys, they're making this way too easy for you. Like now we've got a triangle tool. We don't even have to put our three-sided polygon in there. They just give you a triangle. That is brand new. That's a brand new shape right there. I like to use the hand tool. I'm going to do the zoom tool first. So if I use this little magnifying glass, I can zoom in on my bristle brush tree. I don't know why it's got a black outline on it, but anyways, I can zoom in on it. If I want to zoom out quickly, I can double click the hand tool and it just brings me back to my full view. So if I want to zoom in on the ostrich, I can double click the hand tool to quickly zoom out. And then the last little things down here, this is pure black and white, this little tiny two squares. If I click on it, it makes my colors pure black, which is 6 zeros. If I flip it, I can go to pure white, which is 6 Fs. That's the code for pure black and pure white. If I'm over here, this isn't quite pure black. You can see how the code changes. So some of you are into the actual code numbers of colors. You can get that information right down here. So those are pretty much the tools. These down here we don't use a lot, so I'm not really going to go over them. Does anyone have any specific questions about the tools? Does it kind of make sense? Right? There's lots of stuff that we can do. And then when you look at your options panel, there's even more things. Like when I talked about the sponge tool, you can desaturate or saturate. You can change like how much saturation. You can change to a little airbrush. Like there's all kinds of settings. You can change the type of brush that you're using for saturating or desaturating. So there's so many customizable things up here that you can play around with. Do we go until 43? Is that? Yes, 43. So we have officially 10 minutes. I'm not going to start our shapes 1, 2, and 3 until Tuesday because, I don't know, we only have 10 minutes and I need to learn these shape tools before I teach them. So I'm going to give you guys the next 10 minutes to kind of play around in Photoshop. I'm going to come around if you have any specific questions. I can try to help you out, but the rest of the time is going to be yours.